What's up, y'all? My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. Today is the 17th of April, 2025. We're out here. If there's noise, there's a road. If there's other things making sounds, then cool, all right? Raw, real, In the Image Clothing Company. I'll get into it. I'll talk about the three sides of our company as a whole. We'll talk about where clothing sits, and then we'll get into this actual video here, because this is titled Double Stitches Are Stiff and Grippy and potentially very much altering to the human body. So yeah, In the Image Clothing Company, yeah, we're a clothing company, but really we address the human body's natural function. We come at it through the skeletal system, the thing that doesn't change. The fat content changes, the muscle mass changes, but the skeletal system of the human being just has to stay within its neutral joints of every position. And let me address, this shirt's not quite the ideal size for me. It's slightly a little bit too big, if I'm just being real about it, but I have this shirt and I have it on right now. So, all right, speaking out of example, but also the example is that I'm not perfect. So, if we place clothing onto the human body, its center line can get altered. There's a sternum, a spine, the trachea, the nose, the jaw. The jaw naturally stabilizes the entire body, and if it's not allowed to, then the body can't be stabilized by the jaw. Clothing, if there's anything in it that's imbalanced left to right, front to back, weight-wise, it'll pull the body out of its only center line on an earth with gravity, pulling us straight down. So then there's damage, chronic patterning, scar tissue that builds up, and we just show how to always keyword allow the human body to work. We can't get it to do anything it won't do. It's just a mechanical machine, and it only has the operations it does. So we talk about a lot of things, free modifications within clothing, standing, sitting, walking, eating, hydration, sleeping naturally, okay? The goal is natural, and that's what we do. Another third of our company is In the Image Clothing Company podcast, where we have deep discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. I get bold, I get blunt, and just speaking things as they are. The gospel of Jesus Christ is AKA the truth of all things. You don't have to believe in some religion, but we all live on the same earth and we're all human beings. How is this what it is? And we discuss it over there. So another third of us is In the Image Clothing Company music. I'm a fingerstyle guitarist. I address sizings and setups of guitars to allow the hands to work and not be altered, because as we talk about, the hands are essentially the shoulders, the feet are essentially the hips. The body will only ever work activated as a whole. Anywhere any of it goes, all of it has to. So it's all one, okay? Now, clothing for everybody, for that reason that I just said, has to sit in a certain location, and the same one. Whether you're a man, a woman, if you're tall or short or skinny or fat or any age, any part of the earth from any time period to ever be, the body's only going to do what it's going to do. It has to breathe, it has to stand, it has to function and digest food and do all the things that it does. The only way that it ever will. So, pants need to be entirely above the hips. So there's no restriction to the functionality of the pelvis at all. The waistband needs to be slightly higher in the front than the rear, because the core muscles are like all the muscles within the body. They have to shorten to contract, to work, to stay as they would always be, unless altered, okay? So the tops that we wear, the seams up here, right now I'm in a t-shirt. I'm really pretty much most of the time, yes, it's really common for me to be in button-ups, but I'm in a t-shirt. The seams on top of our shoulders need to sit evenly behind the little bones at the peak of our shoulders. Those are the other end of the collarbone, and that's how we keep our shoulders in their only neutral position behind our head, and that's where these upper trapezius muscles are. The very base of the rear of the skull is where they connect, along the spine of the neck, which is called the cervical spine, to the top/rear of the shoulder. And so that's how we just let the body be how it's going to, coming from the shoulder seams. Now, The edge seams, like I addressed earlier, this shirt's slightly too large, but they should be right at the edge of the shoulder because that's where the functionality is. And you can see kind of what's happening here with the little bit of clash that's going on because the seams don't quite sit where they should on this shirt for me personally. Now, two things we have as prerequisites under In The Image Clothing Company. Conditional. There's not always ropes in shoes that we call laces. There's not always tags in clothing. But when there are shoelaces, it's just a weave across the foot. There's only one way the human foot is shaped, so there's only one way we can do the weave to accommodate for that. In The Image Clothing Company's shoelacing technique is what that is called, by us at least. Found wherever you find us on the anywhere that you can find us. No matter where you can find us, you'll find that. And then with that, we tie our shoes over toward the inside to the center line of the human being on both feet. Otherwise, potential rotation issues throughout the entire body to the tips of the fingers and the tip of the head if there's imbalances at the feet from ropes. Drawstrings are huge as well, right? So, yes. Second prerequisite, we remove all tags from clothing. Anywhere a tag is within clothing, it's either causing a physical gap, changing the skeletal system's only working position, and or just not allowing the musculature to activate. Where the tag's placed, then the body's trying to compensate, and it can't. The human body can't work within compensation because everything has a role to play. All right, so double stitches in clothing. I'll show you right here. This is a t-shirt, okay, one that I personally wear. And with it, it has what's called a double stitch. Right here, you see it's literally just double stitched. It's that simple, that's why they call it that. On the inside though, see all this grippiness that is there? How it's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between those two stitches? That's very, very grippy. Well, look at this here on the sleeve. It's the same thing I'm showing as the sleeve, but I've folded these up and so you can see it. That's not really exactly why I was doing that, but yeah, partially is because the shirt's a little bit too large, as I was saying, and we don't want our sleeves touching our forearms. There's a video under In The Image Clothing Company titled Keeping Short Sleeves Short. That's what's going on here. But with that grippiness, it's not so noticeable on our arms. I mean, there's things that can cause it to be, if you're really hairy like I am, seriously, that's something that actually we're going to talk about when and as we do. But yeah, that grippiness can grip onto your body hair. But the big thing is around the waist, I talk about keeping shoulders separate from hips as far as clothing goes. Not allowing things like that double stitch that is down here so often on the tails of shirts in modern designs, not allowing that to grip the pants because then your shoulders are being connected to your hips from an external source, being the clothing that we wear. And we have a video titled Keeping Shoulders and Hips Separate, if that's what it's titled exactly. It's something similar to that because that's what we discussed. But yeah, that's huge there, and it's just so grippy. When there's a double stitch on the rear of pants, the seam that just goes through the crotch of pants, what'll happen is not only can it be grippy like this on the tops that we're talking about, but what it'll do is rotate the pelvis. And we've talked about it because you'll sit down and you'll press weight against the rear of your pants and it'll pull on that stitch and rotate it. Because a single stitch can just move pretty easily, but when you double stitch it, what happens is it rotates the whole fabric and it twists your whole pelvis. So we've talked about it, but in this video, we're gonna go over double stitches in multiple areas, because what happens as well is even just on pant cuffs, on the bottoms down here, if you have a double stitch down there, it can just make the pant cuff really stiff and your leg motion is just inhibited. Because when we walk, we're actually walking like within our pant legs. You move your leg until it hits the front of your pant cuff, and then you step, and then you step forward, and your leg hits the rear of your pant cuff, and then you step. We're kind of like moving within our clothing. There's a video I made under the main side here of In The Image Clothing Company titled "People Don't Move Through Life, They Move Through Clothing." Something very similar to that, because that's what's happening. And when there's stiffness like that, it'll just restrict, right? The feet are essentially the hips. It'll restrict your hip motion, because as your foot is moving and that pant cuff is hitting your lower leg ankle area, if it's really stiff, then your hip will not be able to have all of its motion, because the hip motion starts at the foot. So things like that are going on. Just because there's a double stitch rather than a single stitch, meaning just the stiffer you get, the more grippy material you get, the more potential for restriction to the body. And so you've probably seen this often, meaning you have the potential to, in the Image Clothing Company videos, me cutting off the stitch around the tail of the t-shirts that I wear. And if you don't cut them off, what you can do is just fold them up. Well, okay, look, right? Fold them up exactly like this. It'll be the exact same thing, but down here, because they do the exact same stitch on these type of designs on the sleeve cuffs as they do on the shirt tail down here. So yeah, that's why I do this, and I've explained it where I have under In The Image Clothing Company, but I do like to cut that off, because as I talk about with tags in clothing and with unnatural synthetic materials in clothing, they didn't even exist as of today's date. Just decades back is when they were invented. Ever before then, they weren't a thing. They didn't put stuff like that into clothing. They didn't make clothing out of fake things. Those materials are man-made, and they're invented, and they're put together unnaturally and heated up, and stuff that's come from oil, clearing the earth, and really, really unnatural. What I'm saying is, double stitching, the way that they do it nowadays, it wasn't like this either. And it's only been decades. A big part of that's just the machinery that they use, they didn't have in the past. There was no such thing as machinery until there was, like sewing machines. People would be stitching by hand, and they wouldn't do this by hand, just because there's so many different ways you could stitch something, and this is just what the machines do. And it's very, very, very grippy. So yeah, people are getting so fatigued from double stitches. What happens is, anytime there's gripping of materials against materials, or just, as I'm saying, added stiffness, just because it's an extra, you're just doubling the thickness of what you could need if you can get just a solid single stitch, or just another design of stitch that doesn't have all this little like hatching pattern that's just going to catch on things. That's one reason why people are just so fatigued. That's one reason why people's cores are deactivated almost chronically, almost always. Yeah, the core can never deactivate. It's just part of the body that only ever works as a whole. And context, mine was at times and for quite a lot of time throughout my life, but I wasn't able to breathe, and I didn't have feet arches that even worked. There's other reasons that go into these things, and many, but double stitches are actually very damaging. It's not anything that you can even have a say to like want to care about. If it's placed onto you, it's doing what it's doing to your body. So just something to be aware of, because so many designs nowadays are just going to come like that, because things at this time period are stitched by machines, and not only people using the machines, but robotic automated things, and it causes problems that a lot of times we're just not aware of. And then we'll go to other things to try to fix these problems, like feeling excessively thirsty or stretching, right? The things that we talk about, people will be trying to go on runs or workouts just because their core isn't allowed to do its only function, because it's being connected unnaturally to the shoulders because of just a grippy seam that's just a way of stitching something that happened. Yeah, we just don't know what we don't know. And as I say, one of the phrases I say so often under In the Image Clothing Company, it's as obvious as it is once you see it. And also, it's as real as it gets. It's not something to take lightly, seriously, because of the repercussions that's happening through the entirety of your life because of just some excessive grippiness or excessive stiffness, wherever it may be. And that goes for any part of the body. It just will be stiffer. You think about seams down the sides of pants, and same thing. You need to be able to bend that seam at the knee joint, and if it's really stiff, just meaning more than it would need to be. If we can do things to just lessen stiffness, lessen restriction in all ways, that's how we just stop restricting our bodies. And that's all we can do. We can't train them to do anything, but we can let them be. We just have to know how to in a modern world, right? So anywhere that there could be a double stitch at all, it's not always such a terrible thing depending on where it's placed, but it can be doing the things that I've shown here. So yeah, whoops. This lawn just got aerated recently, and so there's little clumps of mud through this on the ground. It's fine. Anyway, that's what we're gonna say for this, and it really is something to be very intentional about. So yeah, today is, as I said, some mud, just so you know what I mean. It's the 17th of April, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. And yeah, so there's some context on double stitches and some things you can do and some things you can be aware of to help your body, because there's a lot that comes from this. So anyway, we will have clothing available when we do, made out of 100% natural materials, staying centered, fitting correct, and that's how we will allow the human body to work. So if you'd like to purchase it, just do all that you can to get it in your size. Oversized clothing in itself, like this actually kind of is, honestly, this shirt, is an imbalance, and sometimes it just gets very, very, very oversized. So yeah, do all you can, okay? And yeah, thank you.